Hey everyone, welcome to Shop Talk. We're looking at the Husqvarna 562 XP, and then a little later we'll be looking at the MS261 Stihl chainsaw. These have the Auto Tune or the advanced module on them, both of them do. And they have completely different run characteristics than you're used to on your other old school chainsaws. In this particular Husqvarna had a hot start situation. It would not start properly when it was warm. Been to a couple shops and of course ended up on my bench here, and I'll show you what I found. Husqvarna says that these saws should have 100 pounds to 150 psi to run properly. 100 is really on the weak side. 150 is good. You can actually get higher compression with oil buildup under the rings, so be aware of that. Sometimes high compression is not good when you get above the 150 mark. Just be aware of that. This one would cut good. I ran it out in the wood, cut with it, run good, shut it off. Really hard to start. It had the most current electronics put into it that did no good. It passed the pressure and vacuum testing, passed it fine. But what I found was after it ran for a while and I ran a compression check, it went from 145 cold, I tested it, down to about 115. Quite a drop. And what it was, you can look inside the cylinder, and on the intake side it's lost some of the chrome around the intake, an indication of a lot of dirt getting into the air cleaner, causing the low compression. Wasn't real obvious by looking in the intake side. It wasn't that, or excuse me, the exhaust window, it wasn't that obvious, but it was on the intake side. So just be aware on these saws, you're going to have to dig a little deeper, and it's different run characteristics than you're used to. Stihl has their version 2, and I had an issue with one of theirs. On this particular model, the gentleman was doing some thinning with it, and he only had it for 2-3 days, and he said it just wouldn't run properly, no power. I did try to start it. It had no power, and it did sound like it was plugged up, and I pulled the fire screen, and it was plugged solid. I replaced it, fired it up, and it did exactly the same thing out on the test wood instantly. Pulled the screen out again and it was plugged, and so I looked inside the muffler and it was heavily plugged with carbon. I talked to the customer, and what he'd been doing is cutting small limbs, real small ones, and he'd only been running it at about a quarter or less throttle, and so he's not getting it hot enough to burn clean. And so it's loading up, and so I coached him on running it at a higher RPM and just making quick cuts with it to get the motor up to heat range, because you do have to have the fire screen this time of the year. We're in the middle of a drought here in Oregon. But be aware that these saws have all different run characteristics than you're used to, so be aware when you're looking for issues with them that they do perform different. Any questions on your saws, give the chainsaw guy a call.